you heard of zombie cells? We all have them more and more as we get older. These are aging cells that really aren't doing much anymore, but they're still hanging around inside of us, and that can cause chronic inflammation around them. And chronic inflammation can be the root of a lot of age-related diseases and conditions. Well, now a series of studies at the Mayo Clinic has been looking at how to better identify them, how to better counteract their effects. So let's bring in our guest, Dr. Marissa Schaffer, Mayo Clinic, and at the Robert and Arlene Kogod Center on Aging. Thanks for being with us.
Great to be here. Looking forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of gave a brief summary of what zombie cells are, or also known as, these are, I'm trying to find my notes here for the other, senescent cells. Is that the correct term?
Yep, that's the term we usually refer to them as.
Yeah, well, why don't you give a better description than I can of what these are and how they affect us as we age?
Sure. So senescent cells actually occur throughout the lifespan, from birth to death, and they occur for a number of reasons, often in response to stress, and actually that's a good thing. But so by stopping dividing, they essentially do whatever their role is, and oftentimes that's stopping the propagation of damage to a daughter cell, such as could occur in cancer. However, in aging, we know that these senescent cells accumulate and they take on a pro-inflammatory phenotype, so they can secrete molecules that can adversely influence their environment.
And so leading to chronic inflammation. And as we age, chronic inflammation has been identified as the source of a number of conditions.
Indeed, yes, this is very true. Well, let's first state that inflammation is really important. Inflammation protects us from disease. It helps us cure injuries or resolve injuries. But we know that the chronic persistent inflammation can contribute to a number of conditions, including cardiometabolic conditions, Alzheimer's disease, dementia, and other conditions. Senescent cells, we know, secrete pro-inflammatory molecules, including inflammatory molecules that could potentially contribute to inflammation that's linked to disease.
Okay.
So they are, go ahead.
Oh, so I was going to say now, you identified this, that these are a source of contributing issues here. And now a series of studies to look at, to better identify them and to figure out pathways to either eliminate them or potentially reactivate them.
That's exactly correct. So one thing that people have been studying senescence for many years, and one thing that's very clear is they're rare, they're lowly abundant, so there's not very many of them often in tissues, at least when they're first accumulating, and also they can be very highly variable. So they can be very different in different conditions, the types of cells, the types of organs that are containing them. So this is part of a huge effort by the NIH-supported Cellular Senescence Network Consortium, which is a consortium in which our specific goal is to develop new tools and new biomarkers to identify senescent cells, particularly those that are accumulating and aging and potentially contributing to age-related disease. So that's part of the work that we recently published.
So what could this lead to in terms of a medical approach to these?
Well, undoubtedly, we're trying to understand what the identity of these cells are, what they're doing in specific tissues, and with that information, we can also devise new therapeutics to target them. And that might be able to benefit a number or prevent a number of different aging conditions or potentially halt aging conditions, including cardiovascular disease, dementia, kidney disease, pulmonary disease, many others.
In the meantime, I mean, short of, medical approaches and interventions, what do you tell people to do to help age more healthily, to combat themselves through lifestyle choices, to prevent the unwanted effects of these zombie cells?
So, I mean, one thing that's very clear is that there's a lot we can do. Our everyday choices matter quite a bit. Diet, exercise, eating a healthy, plant-forward diet, and maintaining a healthy weight, getting regular activity, maintaining good sleep, high-quality sleep, maintaining social networks, and reducing stress. These have compounding effects for not only potentially preventing senescent cells, but I think benefiting multiple hallmarks of aging. And the interesting thing is that senescent cells are targeted to many facets of aging, such as DNA damage, and autophagy and metabolic stress, they're often linked. It's not just one aging mechanism. And by focusing on multiple behavioral and lifestyle attributes that we know are good for us already, we can essentially prevent or potentially offset these types of aging changes.
There has been, one approach that I've seen, and I'm sure many others have heard about, is advocating for fasting for several days as a way to activate the bodies, whether it's kind of the ketone response, that the body itself, in responding to fasting, will clean out these zombie cells. What is the medical view of that approach? And certainly there are hazards with that as well.
Yeah, so I actually have a long history in studying fasting-based approaches because in my PhD research, I study the impacts of calorie restriction on the brain. And there are remarkable, profound impacts of fasting, intermittent fasting or calorie restriction on the brain and body, in part because it activates autophagy. And autophagy is one of the cleanup mechanisms that can be activated in cells in response to nutrient reductions. And this essentially can activate the clearance or removal of debris, damaged proteins, damaged organelles. However, one thing I will say about calorie restriction, intermittent fasting, is it's just really important to think about the individual goals and health status of an individual person. I mean, I am not a medical doctor, so it's certainly not something I would recommend. I think it's something that people need to discuss with their medical practitioners. I think it can be beneficial for some people, but I think it does carry some risks for people. So for example, cardiovascular risks have been linked to intermittent fasting for some individuals.
Right. So there you go. You got to look at the good and the bad, so that there are some benefits, but there are certainly some reasons not to do it. So speak to a medical professional before you take that approach. It is interesting. And one other thing I want to talk to you about, I saw this in other research from the Mayo Clinic recently that kind of ties into this, and that is the idea of health span versus lifespan. The idea that is, we look at people are living longer, but you also want to look at quality of life, living healthily longer. Explain that that differentiation there.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. As a geroscientist, my goal is to understand aging with the goal of trying to promote health span, identify solutions that might help people improve or promote health span. And that is pushing back the onset of disease and disability until later in the lifespan. I think there's more of a goal right now in the aging field, not necessarily to get people to live longer, particularly if those additional years have additional disease and disability. It's about trying to help people live healthier lives, have more health back in their lifespan. And that's really the concept of health span.
Yeah, so what are the approaches being done now to try to really go down that path of increasing health span?
I mean, the approach we often take in the very reductionist way that we do science is to pick apart these hallmarks of aging, whether they be autophagy, as we've discussed, or senescence or inflammation, and try to get to the mechanistic molecular causes of what's going on. And when we can do that, we can devise molecular solutions such as drugs or small molecules that can target these mechanisms with a goal of trying to improve them and improve these aging mechanisms. However, we know there are multiple aging mechanisms that are occurring simultaneously. So we can think about polytherapy, more than one approach at once, but this is why we also really encourage things like diet, exercise, sleep, because we know that those interventions, they work because they probably target multiple aging pathways at once in beneficial ways. And I think aging, just like aging kind of unfolding is multiple things happening at once. I think trying to halt or support healthy aging requires targeting multiple things at once.
Yeah. Fascinating research. I could keep talking about this for a while. Hope to have you back on again to keep talking about some of these issues, because they're very interesting and so impactful to people. But it sounds like, in the meantime, you would recommend people speak to their doctors about what to do to address your health span and what to do to address your aging cells accumulation in the organs.
Yes, I think certainly. I think talk to your doctors and any age-related conditions you might have, try to manage those, and then do what we've known for years to work well, eat well, get out and move, try to get good rest, try to manage your stress. Those are things we can try to do every day to help improve our health span.
Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate the time today. Dr. Marissa Schaffer with the Mayo Clinic and the Robert and Arlene Kogod Center on Aging. Thank you.
Great to speak with you. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
you too.